I don't need to learn to communicate with men on my improv team because I am not a man. Now try replacing the word man in that sentence with a different group of people and have another go of your own. I'll wait. That phrase, no matter how you just filled in the blank, sounds pretty wild, doesn't it? It feels wrong. Because to be a successful team member in a scene and outside of it, you have to be able to communicate with everyone in the room somehow. And you might think that you already do, but I'm going to pose this. Do you? Really? Today, we're going to have a conversation about why good communication is an important step towards realizing your goal as somebody who does really good improv. So today we're going to have a conversation about why good communication is an important step towards realizing your goal of doing really good improv. We're going to diagnose some of the causes of communication breakdown on improv teams and answer an important question by the end of this episode. And that question is, what is the one skill that separates good improvisers from great improvisers? The kind of improvisers who can get up on stage with literally anyone and do a good scene. By the end of this episode, you will know what that skill is, and you'll have also a clear 4-step path towards developing that skill yourself. Welcome to Your Improv Brain. I'm your host, Jen DeHaan, and I've taught and I've coached improv at several different improv schools. I also used to run the online division of a theater in LA. But now I like dropping improv stuff here on YouTube and the podcast and on my websites, improvupdate.com and stereoforest.com. So let's go back to that opening line. That one you might remember. I don't need to learn to communicate with men on my team because I am not a man. It sounds obvious that it's wrong, I hope. And yet I've heard different versions of this statement many times from very smart, very well-intentioned people in good faith who I respect. I've heard these variations kind of around the idea of I'm not neurodivergent, so I don't need to listen to your neurodivergent improv podcast. Now, these people had good intentions. They just didn't see or hear what they were missing in that statement. I even called it out in all the intros and the descriptions. So it's not obvious to many what that difference in communication even really is. But let's think about how a statement like that comes across to the person hearing it, regardless of the good intention or good faith was in the person saying it. It says to someone on the other side, I don't need to learn about how you think or how you communicate in order to relate to you. You need to do the communication or thinking my way, the statistically prominent way. I actually don't even think that that's what they're thinking. I think it's more like, I don't think we have communication problems. Everything's fine. So I'm pretty sure that everyone who said that to me didn't mean it like the way that it would sound like in someone's brain like mine. Or they just didn't want to listen to the podcast, and that is fine. I respect that. But they probably just didn't think they had communication issues in improv. They didn't think that they have to think about communication at all or different types of people from themselves because they're part of the statistical majority. So the people around them might be compensating for a lot of the shortfalls pretty well. And all those people who are doing compensations are doing some exhausting heavy lifting. So that exhausting heavy lifting is happening from all the people who are kind of different from that statistical norm. Instead of meeting in the middle, one person has to go the whole way over, or as far as they possibly can, to compensate for the communication shortfall. And that's the problem. Because right now, in most places, improv is wired to the norm, whatever that norm is in a particular region. And this means that communication problems are pretty rampant in improv, considering this, simply because so many different kinds of people do it. There are so many different types of improv brains. And the people who aren't part of that default group often struggle internally. That's an invisible struggle until the problems arise. And those people might feel like they have to change how they think or how they act to fit in. They might try to match that norm. And in doing so, they aren't bringing their own unique perspective to the stage. They feel like they can't, that it's not allowed. And another one that I hear a whole lot of, and this hurts every time, is that different person, the statistical minority, getting kicked off the improv team, or a new one forming with everyone except them on it, or everyone except them in the WhatsApp chat. So what are the real root causes of communication issues? And I think it boils down to three main things to try and simplify an extremely dense and complicated issue. So this episode isn't hours long. I don't think you'd want that. Anyways, number one, not caring, or at least not caring enough, because caring leads directly to listening. And if you don't genuinely care about understanding the person in front of you, like genuinely put a good effort in, you might not be able to truly listen to them or truly hear what they're saying. So caring leads to learning, taking the time to learn about others, to learn about cultures, to ask a teammate questions, ask them how they feel or what they think or how they thought a scene went, what it meant, not giving notes or anything, but what did that scene mean to you, for example? Did we get the same thing? And believing them in good faith as often as possible. The second issue, high level, making assumptions. We assume that other people think the same way we do, or that we've had the same kind of life experiences. Even me as a neurodivergent person, I thought everyone thought the way I did for the longest time until I realized that wasn't the case. We fill in the blanks and fill in subtext with our own story, with our own voice, with our own type of brain. Not the other person, ours. We don't know we're different until we actually learn these things. And sometimes we come across the information by chance. And third, not taking the time to learn about who we're doing improv with outside of the scene. Your scene partners are whole people with long, varied lives and expertise and experiences, and you won't learn who they really are without some good faith, in-depth conversations. As humans, not as characters. Now, here's one case where I was surprised by how much I misunderstood my scene partners while I was taking a narrative class. In this narrative class, we had an opportunity to analyze each scene after it happened before we continued. Just what the scene meant, how you understood it, like on a technical basis, not noting. All the people watching the scene were asked to interpret it. And a lot of what happened occurred in the subtext. That was this style of improv. And guess what? My takeaway was often very different from nearly everyone else watching in most of the scenes. My intention with my characters, they varied quite a bit from what was understood because there was a lot of nonverbal stuff in this style. And I was very used to verbal improv. The scenes, they worked. We were all listening to each other, but it was like kind of mind-blowing to figure out that I had a different understanding of what was communicated nonetheless. And it was a great learning experience for me in a lot of ways, seeing how my autism kind of affected my understanding of subtext. And it was a great big note of sort of where I should go and what kind of improv I should do. And by the way, this is a fantastic exercise to try in your own classes in any improv style. So suggest it to your teacher or do it with your students and let us know what happens in the comments or in the Discord. So here's the good news. The teams and performers who really learn to listen, who don't always assume, and who focus on building a scene together, they find a lot of success. Because good improv is about meeting in the middle and building together. It's not about making your scene partner do all of that work and compensation on their own. So yes, you almost certainly do need to do some work on communication to understand other ways of thinking and living, all the ones that you'll encounter in improv, even if you live in the same location and speak the same language or think you are. The best experienced improvisers, they can improvise with anyone. It doesn't matter if their partner has been doing improv for 10 minutes or 10 years. These improvisers can find a way to connect, to understand each other, and to do a good scene. So how do they do that? And this brings us to the 4 steps that essentially address the challenges that we just discussed earlier. So step 1 is listening. This is the foundation of everything in improv. If you care, or if you just decide to try hard, you listen. And listening isn't just about the words. It's about listening to the body language, the tone of voice, the energy, the cadence. These improvisers truly listen and hear what the other person is offering. And just as importantly, or even more importantly, they'll notice when the communication gaps might be occurring, and then they have a better chance at sensing the disconnect and working to solve it in the scene as their character. And that brings us to step 2, or thing 2. They know their scene partners really well, and if they don't, let's say it's that new improviser who's taking their very first class, they rely heavily on that step 1 of listening. So they might focus on clarifying instead of assuming, and verbally or physically filling in those gaps. It's being transparent. It's not assuming things. And this is just as relevant in a scene as it is in a conversation outside of one. Thing number 3 is learning about their community outside of the scene. This is what the best improvisers do to learn how their teammates communicate as people, and they don't force them to assimilate into a certain improv culture or way of thinking or style. They encourage that improviser's lived experience, their neural wiring, their unique point of view to come out on stage and be who they really are genuinely. Make it relatable to them within the style of improv that you're doing. Accepting people as different and not forcing them to change for the scene, for the theater, or the team makes a community way stronger, because then everyone on the team is doing that and they create a space that is flexible and supportive. But the goal is always to meet someone somewhere in the middle as much as possible, whichever side of the difference that you're on. And if you have certain advantages or privileges being part of the norm, try to do a little bit of extra work on this, perhaps. If you're willing to go a whole lot further than the middle to support those people who usually have to do all the traveling to the other side, you might find it a very rewarding thing to do in many different ways. But it might not look like what you're thinking about, and that's the challenge I pose to you in this video. Do some exploring, see what you find. For example, putting in this work might help you notice how someone on your team might not add to a storyline much when you're doing a big long set, but they are on fire when it comes to callbacks and recalling details that the rest of the team forgets. Maybe you notice this and learn that they can't handle really adding to a particularly plotty storyline, but they seem to remember everything that happened and can fill in the gaps. Meeting in the middle might look like not seeing their aversion to plot as some kind of deficit, but instead supporting these moves, initiating scenes more and pushing the story and letting them follow and do what they're best at. Instead of forcing them to get better at plot or for you to get better at callbacks, you remain a well-rounded team with all your various improv brains focusing on what each of you do best. And that leads to step 4, lots of reps. These great improvisers might opt to get a ton of practice in with different people, with different coaches, with different teachers. They might seek out different types of improvisers and different styles of improv or different formats of comedy even. They might choose to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Humans learn through practice and variety. A great improviser can do a good scene with anyone who is standing in front of them. And to do that, they learned to listen more and assume less. I'll return to that question from the beginning in a second. But first, if you really felt this episode in your bones, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button and or share it with another improviser to let me know to make more stuff like this. You can tell them that you love communicating with them so well in improv, or you commiserate about how much your community might need these tips. And in the comments or our Improv Update Discord, let us know what that one thing you do to get to know or understand your teammates a little bit easier in the scene or outside of it. All the links are in the description and the show notes, including to newsletters I send out weekly about all this stuff. And by the way, shout out to the Improv Update Discord for this week's topic, inspiration. So we come back to the question from the beginning of the episode. If I had to do one skill that separates good improvisers from really great ones, what is that skill? And what I think it is, anyways, is the ability to adapt communication style. It's not about being the funny person in the room or who has done improv the most and gotten highest on that proverbial ladder. It's about being a really generous and flexible communicator. The great improvisers out there, they don't expect other people to adapt to them. They take on the work of adapting to other people in the room. They have the experience. They can do that. They've got the confidence, and they have the privilege, right? They're curious. They care. It leads to next level listening. And those things are the most important skills that let that person connect with anyone at any time and build a really amazing scene together with their scene partners, whoever they are. And if you've had a so-called atypical brain your whole life that has kind of forced you to continually adapt no matter where you go, that might be why you're pretty good at improv right out of the box. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back here next Monday. Bye for now. You have been listening to Your Improv Brain, a Stereoforest production. This show is created and is written, edited, and produced by Jen Hahn of Stereoforest.com. You can find show information, show notes, transcripts, and contact information at the show's page at stereoforest.com/improvbrain. Thanks for listening.